In 2018, a 56-year-old father of four named Tayyab Suyami was living in a quiet, modest town in New Jersey called Little Ferry. Tayyab had moved to the United States from Africa back in 1996, and after getting settled in New Jersey, he had landed a job as an accountant for a food importing company. At first, Tayyab's salary had been enough to provide for the family, but as his family grew, his salary just wasn't enough, and money became a real problem. And so eventually, Tayyab's wife also got a full-time job, but even then, with two full-time working adults, the family had to stay on a very strict budget just to make ends meet. And that year, in 2018, one of Tayyab's daughters was getting ready to go to college, and so Tayyab was forced to refinance his mortgage just to make the initial payments on his child's college bills. But despite his financial struggles, Tayyab did not let it bother him. He was an eternal optimist who fundamentally believed that in the end, everything would just work itself out. On May 1st of that year, Tayyab was on his way home from work when his wife called him and asked if he would swing by the grocery store and pick up some orange juice. So Tayyab stopped at the ShopRite grocery store in Hackensack, New Jersey, which was only a couple miles north of Little Ferry where they lived. And he went inside, he went to the juice aisle, and he scanned the different brands of orange juice, and at some point he grabbed the most appealing orange juice that was still within their budget. It was $5. He takes the juice, he goes to the front of the store, he pays for it, he goes outside, he hops in his car, and he heads home. When he pulls into his driveway, he gets out, he goes into the house, he goes right into the kitchen where his wife was, and he proudly set the orange juice down on the kitchen table, expecting a thank you from his wife. But his wife turned around and she looked at the orange juice and she saw the brand he had purchased, and she immediately said, "How much did you pay for that?" And Tayyab said, $5. And she said, "Well, you got to take it back because I know that brand is on sale for $2.50 at the grocery store right down the road. So go return this one." And so Tayyab was totally annoyed because he just got home from work. He thought he had done a good deed and now he's in trouble. And so he decided, you know what? I'm not going to fight her on this. He just walked over, grabbed the $5 orange juice, and he went back outside, hopped in his car, and took off. A few minutes later, he arrived at the Hackensack, New Jersey ShopRite. He went inside and he went straight to the customer service desk where there was a teenager behind the counter. And Tayyab walked over to them and he handed them the juice along with his receipt, and he asked for a refund. And so while Tayyab is standing there letting this cashier complete the transaction, he looked behind the cashier at the wall, and there was this sign that totally piqued his interest. And so he's staring at the sign, and then finally the teenage cashier, he finishes the transaction and he reaches out across the counter with Tayyab's $5. And Tayyab, he reaches out and he takes the $5, but then he pauses for a second. And he's kind of looking up at the sign and he's thinking about what he should do. And he knows that if he does this, if he does what the sign is telling him to do, he's going to get in trouble with his wife because this is the exact opposite of what he was sent out to do. But Tayyab just couldn't help it, and he takes the $5 and he proceeds to hand it right back to the cashier, and he tells the cashier what he wants him to do with it. And so a couple minutes later, Tayyab leaves the ShopRite with no juice, with no $5, but 2 small slips of paper in his back pocket. And so Tayyab hops in his car and he drives to the grocery store that's right down the road from their house. He goes inside and he gets the on sale $2.50 bottle of orange juice. And then he goes back into his car, he drives home, he goes in the kitchen and he sets the juice on the counter and tells his wife, "Yep, I got the right one, $2.50. And he's just hoping the whole time that she has not checked the bank account and has not discovered what he had really been doing while he was out, because he had actually spent more money on the second trip than the first time. But apparently his wife had not checked the account yet, and she just thanked him for being willing to go out and get the better deal. And so Tayyab very happily left the kitchen, and he spent the rest of the night watching TV and hanging out with his family. And then early the next morning, Tayyab got up and he decided, you know what? I need to do something to curry some favor with my wife because she's gonna learn what I did with the refund money pretty soon. And so he decided he would just go out and do a bunch of yard work that day, right in front of his wife, to make sure she really saw that he was doing some good stuff. And so he goes outside, he opens up the garage, and he's about to pull the lawnmower out when he notices his car is really dirty. And so he decides, you know what, I'm gonna go wash my car first and then come back and cut the grass and do some other things. And so he goes inside and he tells his wife what his plan is. And she says, okay, I'll see you in a little bit when you come back from the car wash. And then Tayyab went back outside, he hopped in his car and he left. As he was driving to the car wash, he made a pit stop at a small store that was set back off the road. And so he goes inside and he goes right to the back of this little store where there's this strange machine that looks like an ATM, and it has a screen on it with text scrolling across it. And at the bottom, there was an opening where a barcode scanner was kind of projecting down. And so Tayyab walks up to this machine and he reaches into his back pocket and he pulls out those 2 slips of paper he had got from the grocery store cashier the night before, and he puts the first one under the scanner, and then he reads the text that appears on the screen of this machine. And after reading it, he kind of shrugs his shoulders and puts that piece of paper back in his pocket. And then the second slip of paper he puts into the scanner. And then when he reads the words that pop up on the screen, he thinks there's been a mistake because all it says is "see receptionist." And so he rescans the second slip of paper to see if something different will happen. But sure enough, again, it just says "see receptionist." And so he pulls the second slip of paper out of the scanner, he turns around and he walks to the front of the store and he hands the paper to the woman behind the counter. Over an hour later, Tayyab pulled into his driveway, and he sat in his driveway for a second. He was still shaking from what had just happened inside of that small store. So he gets out of his car, which was still totally dirty, and he made his way into the house, and he went straight to the kitchen where his wife was. And so as soon as he gets in the kitchen, his wife turns around and looks at him and says, "Where were you? The car wash is like 5 minutes away. Why were you gone for like 2 hours?" But Tayyab, he's got no expression on his face, and he looks at his wife and just says, "Give me $100. And his wife scrunches her face up at him and says, "No, where's your money?" And Tayyab smiles, he turns around, he reaches into his back pocket, and he pulls out that second slip of paper, and he hands it to his wife, and he says, "Here's my money." After getting that $5 refund at the ShopRite in Hackensack, New Jersey, Tayyab noticed a sign on the back wall that was advertising for a Moneyball jackpot lottery. And he had decided to use the $5 refund to buy 2 lottery tickets. And so he buys these 2 lottery tickets, and the next day, that store set back off the road he went to was a convenience store, a 7-Eleven, and the machine he was using was a machine that scanned your lottery tickets to see if they were winners. And so the first ticket he scanned, it was a dud, it didn't win anything. But the second ticket, when he scanned it, it couldn't process the amount of money he had just won. And so that's why it told him to see the receptionist. And so he brought the second ticket up to the counter, he handed it to the woman, and after she scanned it and saw the amount of money he had won, all she could do was say, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And when he asked her, "What are you looking at? What happened?" She just goes, "Big." And so when he got home, Tayyab handed that slip to his wife, and on it was the amount of money that he had won. He was the jackpot winner. He had won $315 million. Tayyab would say that he and his wife and his kids all laughed and cried and celebrated in the kitchen all night. And within a couple of days, Tayyab had left his job, he retired, and he had paid off all of his family's debts. And at his press conference for the New Jersey lottery, he was quoted as saying, "I love orange juice now."